Summer House should be fun.
Season 7, not fun.
Is Summer House as we know it over?
Or is the spinoff Martha's Vineyard bringing it back to life?
Welcome back to the Real Couchwives podcast, where we overanalyze all things Bravo.
So we've been wanting to talk about Summer House for so long, but Vanderpump Rules has just been all-consuming. So now that the season is over, we have a little bit more of a perspective of it. We're going to talk about what went wrong, what led to such like a, dare I say, toxic season 7. Is Summer House just done? Or, you know, is Martha's Vineyard, this new spinoff, kind of like taking the baton and just like, is that going to be the new version of Summer House?
Yeah, so much to get into. This has been a bit of a hiccup of a season. I think we're definitely experiencing some growing pains in, you know, season 7. They're trying to bring in some new life with Sam and Gabby, Chris. Obviously, Corey kind of joined halfway through the season and became quite a central figure as well. And yeah, like I don't know really how we go forward from here. I think there are too many relationships that have
baggage.
Yeah, baggage, but also I think a lot of like strong personalities. Like I don't know if they're going to be able to really mesh again. I think we've seen the accumulation of like the Lindsay and Paige feud kind of like building up over the seasons, and it really got to like its worst point probably this year, even if they didn't have some, you know, big explosive blow up. But that big explosive blow up then did happen between Danielle and Lindsay.
Yeah.
And I think for like the audience, seeing this season has been really difficult because it's really translated into social media, and social media has become extremely toxic.
There's so many things, honestly, like I don't even know where to start with this. One of them is just like, I feel like overall Summer House has just lost the plot. Like I feel like the premise of what Summer House was built on, which is a bunch of friends who had a share house and they went there every weekend and they partied and they had fun and it was debaucherous and like, you know, that is no longer Summer House. Like that is not the Summer House that we are watching for so many different reasons. One is that they're just not really friends anymore. I think that's probably the biggest thing, right?
Yeah. And they also, you know, I think one of the things that happens with like reality fame and reality success is that you start to make a lot of money. And like the whole premise of like these people that, you know, they need to share this share house because that's the only way that all of them can afford to like spend the summer in the Hamptons, that's kind of gone away too, right? Like they don't need each other. They're really just coming into this summer house for a paycheck. And honestly, like I know it's probably going to be a little bit controversial, but the way that Carl was talking to Lindsay at the reunion really made it seem like he knew like we need to get this all together so that we can come back next season and we can get the paycheck yet another season for doing this show. And obviously with the wedding coming up as well, they want, you know, Bravo to maybe help like pay for that. Maybe if they like extend the season so that they can capture that, Bravo will pay for a certain percentage of what they're seeing. So, you know, I think there's some behind the scenes finessing that might be happening. And that just kind of naturally happens as, you know, shows become more popular and these casts make more money and they become kind of brands in and of themselves. And like, yeah, you're right. The original form of the show goes away and it has to, but
what are we left with? That's a really good point that it's kind of becoming more for a paycheck. I do think that that's actually very evident this season, especially because like we started going back and watching like season 1 and even like a little bit of season 2 and 3, and like you can tell that like they were going to this share house whether it was filmed or not. Like this was just their life. They were going to the Hamptons, they were going to party, and now it does feel like they're really just kind of going there for the show. You could even see it in like the level of parties. Like now the level of parties is always just like really sad. And like no one, I don't think like any of the people who come there know each other. Like, do they just have like an open call? Like come to this house and be filmed.
Well, and even I think of, you know, some of the critiques that have happened this season in particular is kind of like referring to Paige, Sierra, and Maya as kind of like the bed bugs of Summer House because they spend all their time in bed. And like I've never had a problem with that in the past, but they've at least still been able to like bring other elements to the show. But I really do think that like Paige, Sierra, and maybe Maya a little bit too, like, you know, they weren't really in this season as much. Like if you have 3 main cast members that really are bringing a lot to the narrative, then, you know, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Maybe we need to make room for people who are going to bring more friends, who are going to bring like a party to this space, because this is, you know, it is a party show. That's what this is for. This is like Jersey Shore, but like more, you know, refined, maybe. Like,
yeah,
or at least they want you to think it's more refined.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, the people who are bringing the party this season is like the newest and youngest cast member, who is Sam, who's what, like 25, but then also with Kyle, like somehow they are the duo.
Yeah.
Like, so there's like this 40-year-old and this 25-year-old just like turning up. It's like so strange.
Yeah, it is strange. Well, and then even then you have Carl and Lindsay, who are clearly like, you know, moving into a new phase of their life as well, right? Like, they want to be the married couple. They want to be the couple that's going to have children. They want to be like a little bit more, you know, they want to be able to go to Barry's at 7 a.m. They don't want to like party all night. Carl's sober. Lindsay's kind of like dealing with her own kind of like, you know, maybe she's not dealing with her own issues with alcohol, but she's obviously like dealing with the fact that like she was partially sober for a certain period of time. Now she's back to drinking. How does she balance that with like her relationship with Carl? And so they're obviously clearly in a different phase as well. Yeah, I guess if you have like the 3 bed bugs and then you have Carl and Lindsay and you're not really sure where all of these people stand in partying, you really are left with a very minimal cast that's interested in like setting it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a good point too, is that like we've talked about this in the past, like we have grown really kind of like invested in a lot of these characters. Like, I definitely still want to see Lindsay and Carl and Paige and like everyone, and Kyle and Amanda, like in some capacity. I don't know if that means it's like it becomes a new show. They did used to show their like weekday life in New York a lot more. They don't show that at all anymore, and I feel like that part would be interesting. Like, maybe this just kind of evolves and they like pass the summer, you know, baton to someone else, to like maybe a younger group. I don't know. But like the way that it currently is now is just not working. And it's not just the premise. It's not just that they're not partying all the time. It's also that like the friendships have become so toxic. Like, it's just like hit such a level. Like you said before, like it kind of started with Lindsay and Paige, which in the rewatch, I totally forgot that it started so early on. Like, it started in like season 3. Yeah. But at least the first half was like Kyle and Carl, like watching Kyle and Carl's friendships just kind of like disintegrate. Surprisingly, they were able to put it back on track. Like, I was actually like quite shocked, because there was some like extremely detrimental things that were said, especially like upon Kyle, when he was talking about like he basically outed Carl for like going to work like on drugs and stuff like that, and somehow they got back in line. But then watching Danielle and Lindsay, like that is a real friendship that we just watched implode over time, that was drawn out for multiple episodes as well, and like that's not fun to watch. Like, I honestly felt like it almost got to the Salt Lake City, like Beverly Hills style, where you're watching and like you're physically like uncomfortable talking more about like the Beverly Hills, like Erica Jean type, or like the Salt Lake City when you're watching Jen Shaw, and you're just like, this feels like this isn't fun anymore. Like, this is like, obviously it's nowhere near the same and it's totally different, but like it's not fun to watch a really good friendship implode.
No, you're right. And like we said at the beginning of this, like, you know, Vanderpump Rules just kind of like stole the show this season, but I think part of what also happened is this was so hard to watch. Well, that was kind of like a train wreck that you like couldn't look away from. This was like, you really didn't want to deal with it. This was like your homework that you like didn't want to do at the end of the day. Because I just felt like so much dread every time it was like, oh God, it's Monday. Like, okay, let's see how this goes. You know, we knew going into the season that Lindsay and Danielle were no longer friends, that this was not going to be good. We knew that some kind of blow up was going to happen. And the first like few kind of like episodes until about halfway through the season, we don't really see why, because they seem like they're in good footing. They're on the same page. Danielle's supporting Lindsay and Carl, and she's, you know, sticking up for them. And then we get to a certain point in the season, like about halfway through, where it just completely goes off the rails, and we, you know, you're just watching a friendship deteriorate. Like, you know, the level of, you know, like pain that a lot of us felt watching that, like those were real emotions that we could identify with, right? Like, it wasn't just something super crazy like Scandival. Like, it was like, oh, this is like a legitimate friendship that is coming to an end. And whether you're team Danielle or team Lindsay, like, I think we can all identify that it's really difficult to watch that happen, especially with two friends that were so close for so long.
Yeah, and when that's like the main thing that's happening, like that's not like I just keep saying it's not fun, but like it's just like it's not like
but you're
that's
right.
not
No,
entertaining television either. Like it's just like, oh gosh. And then like also I feel like they really would just like tease like this big thing happening, and then like there would be like a whole filler episode, and then like the last 10 minutes this like big fight would implode. And then it would be like a next week on, it would be to be continued.
Yeah.
And then the next week, that section would end the first 10 minutes, and then there would be another filler. So like at the same time as like it was all these crazy things, like those crazy fights were maybe like 30 minutes of like the whole season, and like they just dragged out the same conversation and the same plot. So like it simultaneously also felt like nothing happened.
Yeah, no, I said so many times to Scott, like we're seeing them packing and unpacking more than we're seeing any actual action on this show. And I think to a certain degree that's because of how they structured the episodes too, because as you say, they would end it on some drama, and then they'd start it on a little bit of drama, and then they'd all pack up, and then they'd go home for the week, and then we wouldn't see them until the next weekend. And then it's just like, okay, well now they're unpacking. And like in each episode was like bookended with, if it didn't manage to span an entire weekend, it was like bookended with like weekend. So it's really hard to like follow the narrative.
Yeah, they did have multiple weekends in one, which like I feel like they didn't usually happen, which is probably because like not enough happened during those weekends that they had to like double up.
Yeah, well, and I think Maya specifically said too that like they're oh yeah, we did that, but then we didn't actually get that shown, right? Like there were weekends that clearly like happened, and because nothing happened in the story, they just didn't get shown. So I think that there were like some weird gaps that they were filling in, trying to keep the narrative going. A lot of people also complained that like too many people were able to like leave and go spend weekends away. Like people were going off to weddings,
right?
And like to a certain extent, like maybe that would allow you to have different dynamics. And I think that's how the Danielle Lindsay feud kind of starts, is because Danielle's left alone with the other girls, and they ask her how she feels about their relationship. But at the same time, like it's weird that so many of the cast, like you only have so many weekends that you're signed on to do this, and you can't even commit to like every single weekend that you're gonna be here for. Like you're getting paid to do this. Like you should be coming to the show. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like the cast has also been like really going on and saying that a lot of the fun parts were like left on the cutting room floor, which I really don't understand, because like those are the most fun parts to watch. Like we want to see when they're all having fun as a group. I think they even started like a hashtag or something that was like summer is fun or something. Like basically like we had fun, like you guys just didn't see it. In which case I kind of have a problem with the editors, because it's like why are we cutting the fun parts out? Like we don't just want to see everyone like screaming and crying and like blowing up friendships. Like at least balance it with like some fun times.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's weird, because we saw so much like party setup and like things like that. Like maybe they just didn't really feel like they could show us like that much partying. But like I feel like we definitely like we come to Summer House for the partying to a certain extent. You're living vicariously through these people that have these like lavish like blowout parties that like I personally would never have. Like I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this. This is me living vicariously through the Summer House kids. Like
and it's also just like some levity. Like I feel like that's kind of what the heart of the show is, that like you can get into like tough conversations and drama, but then they can also like all kind of kiss and make up and like go and party, and like that's fun. Like
well, and that's kind of the absurdity of it too, right? Like they're often having these really deep conversations while they're dressed up as like something totally ridiculous. Like even Craig and Paige this season are like they're both dressed up as flamingos or something, and they're having this conversation about the two of them, like, and their relationship and where it's gonna go. And like that's always been like, people are in wigs, people are totally like in weird outfits, and they're having these deep conversations, and that's kind of really enjoyable to get to watch too.
It's so true. Actually, just to kind of like go into a different direction for a hot second, speaking of that conversation with Paige and Craig has shown such a like transition. Like he has changed so much from Winter House. Like I definitely actually have to take a moment to give him props for a second, because like we really destroyed it when we talked about Winter House. If you want to go back to those older episodes, Like, he had said that he saw himself there and he like wanted to change, and like I think he actually has, because he's been like actually like really fun in Summer House and definitely nowhere near as like destructive. And I thought that conversation that him and Paige had at the end was actually like quite adult and like handled it very well.
I know. I was really impressed with the two of them, actually, their ability to kind of have that conversation. It obviously is a really weird place to be, where you're both from like such different worlds and you have to figure out how you're going to like have a relationship going forward. Yeah, definitely. I'm always impressed by Craig one way or another. I think he's a brilliant reality TV star. I've said it time and time again. But I think that the fact that he was able to kind of like course correct and understand, you know, what Paige needed from him, especially after like last season too on Summer House, he had been like, you know, he'd been a bit of the point of the drama. He clearly got like very involved in like the Lindsay feuds as well. So I think it was good for him to take a step back and like understand that, like, you know, you won't get a favorable edit on this show if you show up and be so messy.
Yeah.
So he kind of like took that note and he was like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna like hang out here and like see my girlfriend and then like go home.
Yeah, I mean, it's also not his franchise, so I wonder what we're gonna see on Southern Charm. But yeah, just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out after some of our other episodes. I do think it's interesting to kind of think about like how we got here, right? Like, now we're kind of like, what's the fate of this show? Like, clearly what's happening, is it working? So you had the brilliant idea of like going back and rewatching at least the first episode of like season 1 of Summer House, and then I kind of watched like the first episode of like season 2 and 3, and it is so wild to see the similarities, at least with Lindsay, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how in the first episode of the first season, like of the entire series, we're seeing some of the issues that happened between Danielle and Lindsay right off the bat. Like, Danielle's not even in the show yet, and we're seeing the dynamics between Lindsay and her friends that we've seen in season 7. And, you know, I think Bravo did bring it up at the reunion, kind of like the fight that she had between Christina in that first season. But seeing, you know, her and Everett together, they've only been together for like, you know, a few months, but they've known each other for 2 years. Like, the similarity between that and her relationship with Carl, who she's like, well, we have this like super strong friendship. We have a really good foundation. So I don't see why you should question our relationship. And like, it's just, the parallels are paralleling. It's incredible.
Yeah, it was so crazy. It was such a similar setup. Like, Lindsay's in this new relationship with someone she's been friends with for years, but they just started dating when they come into the house, and like everyone's comments to them is like, yo, you guys are like going 0 to 100, you're already like acting like you're married, and like trying to be like the perfect couple. I actually think her friend, what was her name? Oh gosh, I forgot.
Christina.
Christina. She was like not even in a full season. Who was her roommate at the time, is like, oh, like, let's like drink every time you say babe or something. Like, they are
oh my god.
I know, so many similarities.
Well, and even in the dynamic between Christina and Lindsay in that first episode, Christina's saying things like, you know, like, I need you to like be asking me questions about myself and how I'm doing, and Lindsay's like basically saying, well, I don't see why I need to do that, and like, you're being jealous of my relationship with Everett, and Christina's, I almost said Danielle because like, so that's similar. Christina's saying like, well, I'm not jealous of your relationship, like, I am trying to figure out how we go forward as friends, even though you're now in a relationship. Yeah, it's just weird that it's like almost exactly the same.
It is so similar. And then also Kyle, it's really funny because like his introduction, like in his talking heads, he's like, oh, you know, like, I'm on like pushing 40, and like, it's not really cute to be out like all night, like dancing on tables and like whatever, and like, I have to grow up a little bit, and like, this is his first episode. And he's still struggling with those same concepts, like, how many years later?
Like, yeah, exactly, literally 7 years later. I know. Watching that first episode, I was kind of blown away by how instantly, though, Kyle kind of like understood the plot. He understood the assignment. He knew what he needed to do. He like laid the groundwork for Summer House so well. He described it as kind of like summer camp for adults. He was talking about kind of like the Hamptons in general, and like the ethos that revolves around the Hamptons, and how, you know, the Hamptons is like your rich mom's friend, but like Montauk is like, you know, her like, you know, party girl stepdaughter or whatever, right? Like it's this much like younger crowd. It's super fun. It's chill. It's laid back. But he just like, kind of like instantly transports you into the series, and you're like, okay, I get it. Like, understood.
No, it was actually such a strong start. Also because they did that crossover with Vanderpump Rules, where like Stassi and Katie and Sheena go over to the Hamptons, to their house.
Kristen's
and
there.
Kristen. Yes, of course.
That was fun to get to see her again.
Yeah. But it's funny because I do remember when I was watching Vanderpump Rules, I was like, why are they showing me this like summer house show? Like, I don't care. Like, stop. And now here we are, like so invested.
So obsessed. I know. I remember watching the first episode of Summer House and being like, I don't understand what this is. Like, I don't know what's going on. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a second try. Just because I was such a diehard for Vanderpump Rules that it felt hard to kind of like, make a departure. But as soon as I got into it, I was like, oh no, this is actually pretty great. This is amazing.
See the spin-offs, like honestly, those crossover episodes are just like so well done. There was no crossover episode with Martha's Vineyard though, which we're gonna talk about shortly. We'll definitely get into Martha's Vineyards and all of our thoughts on that. But yeah, so season 1, super crazy right off the bat. Season 2, Kyle and Amanda are together, like already. So
I know
it's just so quick. Something that also sticks out now once you start to rewatch is like a big narrative on season 2. Granted, I only rewatched like the first episode, but now I'm like gonna go do a rewatch again of the whole thing. So let us know if you guys want us to take you along on that journey as well. They talk a lot about how Carl is partying all the time, how Carl is drunk all the time, and like Carl has come out and said that like during his seasons, that's kind of when he started to get like pretty, I guess, like to have like a pretty destructive relationship with like drugs and alcohol, and like you definitely do start to see that in these episodes. Which is hard to watch.
Carl was definitely a really hard character at the beginning. I personally wasn't a fan of him, mainly because of his kind of like F-boy persona, and like I didn't really pick up on the drinking and partying as much because that was kind of like the show, and as we said, like Jersey Shore, like there's been so many shows where like the premise is that they go out and they party and they drink too much and they get crazy. Like even the challenge, like they used to always like go to bars and get like totally wasted and get into the biggest
challenge.
fight. I know. But like, so that was kind of like what was expected. So, you don't notice those things, but Carl kind of like in the way that he just kind of like behaved in general towards like women, especially in those early seasons, especially when Paige, who's like 10 years younger than him, comes in season 3 and is like, this guy only talks to me like, what is it, Friday through Sunday, and then ignores me the rest of the week. So Carl's definitely had an incredible story arc on this show, and it's obviously unfortunate that he's kind of had to go through so many struggles, but I'm like really pleased for him and kind of how he's been able to evolve.
Totally. He's such a different person. We've all like, I think that's been a big topic, is just kind of like the transformation that he has had is just like so crazy and so incredible. It's I just didn't realize like how early on so many of these themes came up. And crazy, like Amanda and Hannah joined in season 3. The dynamics start to shift a little bit. I totally forgot even about like the twins, the work. Oh gosh,
the workers,
who were in the first one, and like,
how could you forget about them? They're so iconic. Oh my God.
Were honestly, they should come back for like an episode.
That would be crazy. Oh my God. Well, I've heard because Danielle's hanging out with Steven a lot.
I saw
those
Stephen
early
McGee
seasons too. Yeah, so maybe we'll get a little Steven in our next season. That could be kind of interesting. It'd be cool to pick up where he left off, right?
Yeah, that would be so fun. Honestly, yeah, those are like
a little messy.
It was very interesting. But like one thing that's interesting to think about too is like, so if so many of these concepts we saw playing out at like the first season, especially with like Lindsay and her relationship, why was it fun to watch then and so not fun to watch now?
Yeah.
And it's probably just all the history and the baggage that comes with it. Like, we didn't really know these people. This was our first experience with them. So, like, we didn't feel that deeply about her and Everett. That would probably be my first thought. But I don't know. It's really interesting to think about.
It is really interesting to think about. Well, so as I mentioned, Kyle setting up the the persona of like Montauk and like the premise of a summer house so perfectly. Part of what that was coupled with was he kind of like introduced this as like a work hard, play hard environment, right? So they went to the city each week, they like worked their butts off, and then that's why they could justify kind of like coming to party their like butts off in the Hamptons each weekend. So that was kind of like it was something that like, you know, was very much part of like our cultural attitude at the time. We were super into the whole idea of a work hard, play hard lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think kind of probably more so than we are now, right? Like I think a lot of people are burnt out from COVID. Like we're constantly talking about how like you need to have work-life balance. Like
That's
we're
true.
we're very much against that now, I think, especially in the age of TikTok. But like that's what this was. And so I think that kind of like really did translate super well because we kind of understood what they were doing and why they were behaving the way that they were. And we were in awe of the fact that these people could like throw these extremely lavish parties where, you know, they completely like trash the house, like the level of, you know, kind of debauchery that it got to. That was fun. And I don't think that that exists anymore in a world where all these people are influencers and all these people just spend all the time on their phone. They don't actually like really, most of these people don't really work for a living. Like even
that's
you
true.
know, like like Paige and Hannah have a podcast, which is totally legitimate work. Like they work their butts off. They're touring constantly. Obviously Kyle has like Loverboy, but for the most part, like, you know, these are still not jobs that are like,
it's not the 9-to-5 grind.
Yeah,
that,
the
like
office corporate like thing that they originally were. And so I just don't think that they have the same need to kind of like party the way that they used to.
That's true. And like Everett actually said it in that first episode. He's like, you know, we have to get up and go to, like, we have to wake up at like 5 a.m. and drive back to New York to go to work because unlike those LA girls, we have jobs.
Exactly. And now they are those LA girls that do not have jobs.
Yeah. And that's it. Like the part, it's not like the partying was the whole thing of the show, but like it was definitely, it was a character almost. Like it was a big part of it. And also just like the friendships, like the same thing with Vanderpump Rules. The reason Vanderpump Rules was like so incredible the first season is because like it was like you were watching like stolen moments. Like you were watching actual real life friends, toxic real life friends who all hook up and cheat with each other and do all these crazy things. But like it just felt so authentic. Whereas like now they're also just like throwing random people into the house who have like the smallest bit of like connection with other people. It's like doesn't feel authentic anymore.
That's true. That's a really good point as well. Like one thing that I was struck with in that first episode of the first season was that they were showing photos and like flashbacks to like seasons before, like when they'd done the same thing, but they like, it wasn't being filmed. They were taking photos of it. But one of the other things is that we have this whole like social media that's like completely like blown up as well within this world. So you have all of these people going on the podcast talking about one another, talking trash about one another, you know, explaining their side of the story. Like that's really taken over and like taken on a life of its own as well. Whereas that didn't really exist at the beginning of Summer House, right? Like they were where they weren't brands, they were people. And now they are brands. And so they kind of have a very different like relationship with everybody else on the cast because everybody else is a brand and everybody needs to be like super hyper conscious of how they're going to come off from season to season. And that also, I think, impacts, you know, their ability to like create these storylines.
Yeah. And that's something that we've mentioned like in kind of covering everything in Bravo right now is that like social media does have such a presence and it kind of loops in and like fuels seasons. And like when they're not filming, we see social media fights happening that then are covered in the show. And like it just kind of like becomes this cycle. Although not social media related, or actually, no, it was social media related. I think it was in season 2 when Kyle came back to the house with Amanda for the first time. And apparently like there was a huge falling out over like the fall and the winter between Amanda and the rest of the girls. And they like weren't tagging her in like Instagram pictures, or like they had cut her out of Instagram pictures, which prompted Kyle to write the 17-page email to the cast.
I forgot about the email. And then didn't he try to like read it out loud like at the first night dinner or something?
I think so.
Oh
Yeah.
God. I think he did. I think he was like he like pulls it out and he was just like, okay, let me just go through some like highlights here.
Yeah, and
Uh
they did show us parts of the email. So there was like, well, that's the thing. Like when you film a show, I mean, actually, this is just for all of them. Like you film a show
yeah.
during like 3 months, so you do have to like kind
Yeah.
of explain what had happened during the time that you weren't filming. I think another thing that like was up against this season too is that like this feud between Danielle and Lindsay was so hyped. You know, like
Yeah.
we got like it was very tight-lipped, but you did get like little bits of it. So like we really had no idea what was happening, but we knew this thing had happened. And then it was just nothing like what we thought it would have been. And it was just so upsetting and gut-wrenching. But like they really did hype into it. So like we thought it was gonna be, I mean, I don't know what we thought it was gonna be. Like I thought we thought it was gonna be a lot more one-sided.
Yes.
And then it was actually very like you can see both sides.
Yeah, it's quite nuanced.
There's a lot to it.
It's true. I think almost every podcast that I've heard or listened to, you know, the hosts went into it thinking automatically that they were gonna like be super anti-Lindsay, like it was gonna be Lindsay's fault, like very clear cut. And I do think that like it's been a lot more complicated than just it being Lindsay's fault or just it being Danielle's fault. I think a lot of like fans like fall one side or the other. Like I think there is quite a like Lindsay's always had like quite an incredible backing of her stands, and so obviously there's like a pretty strong brigade over there. But I think for the most part, like I think a lot of us still fall somewhere in the middle as well. Which might also be controversial. I hope we don't get too much hate from, but that's how I feel. I feel in the middle.
Totally. I do too. I definitely felt for both of them at different points, and we can honestly go into that like for an entire episode of just talking about it, but to be honest, so exhausting. I don't know where the future of the show is. Really interested to see what they do. I don't think the answer is just to like continue to throw in newbies with the older cast. Like it just feels so inauthentic. What is interesting though is moving on to kind of Martha's Vineyard, which is the new spin-off on the block that just kind of came off. It is just airing. We're getting our season finale this week. They're actually older, which is interesting, right? Like they're all in like 30s and like late 20s, and it's still fun to watch. So like it's not necessarily that you need to have a younger cast. Like that's not the piece. And also they're not all best friends. Like there's actually quite a bit of tension. Not all of them know each other, but it still somehow works.
Or like each other.
But it's still you know, it's still early on, but like I'm quite entertained by it. I think it's fun, it's fresh, it's like a different taste. Like it's a different take on it. But it's like, why does this work
when like Summer House is struggling so much, and Summer House should be a more seasoned cast? That's, I mean, I have so many thoughts on kind of like what needs to happen to Summer House. I think I agree, throwing in newbies and like younger and younger people. I think from what I've heard of the Bravo community, people are not interested in that. People don't just want like 20, 25-year-olds like thrown in and like hoping that will revive it, because that's never what it was in the first place. Like these people were still in their 30s when they were starting this show. Like I think Kyle was 34. I think Everett was like 32. Like a bunch of them were in their 30s. I think the twins were like 29 maybe, but still they were pretty like well established in their career, and that was kind of what was fun about it. And I think that like you also mentioned earlier that like they're missing a New York element, and I think that is kind of like one thing that they could maybe do to help revive it. I do think Martha's Vineyard has just been such a breath of fresh air. It has the drama, it has the parts of you that like burn up a little bit, right? Like when the show's able to kind of like handle a topic and you start to like feel something, you start to be like, oh, I'm really on this person's side, or oh, I'm really not on that person's side. Those are the elements that you really need to get in like a first season to be able to like start to, you know, go somewhere and do something interesting with this show. And one other show that we kind of looked at this year was Southern Hospitality, which I think really struggled to find its footing and understand, you know, what it was supposed to be presenting to us. It didn't get packaged into like another episode of Southern Charm and get introduced to us the way that Vanderpump Rules did to Summer House. And so when you brought that up earlier, that Martha's Vineyard also didn't get that kind of introduction, I was kind of like, yeah, you're right. Like, I wonder why they didn't do that. Would it have been too kind of like inauthentic to like pretend as if like, you know, we could go from one cast to the next, but at the same time, like Summer House was already like a proven premise, and it like they knew that it kind of like had legs, and they'd also already done like so many seasons of it that I felt like it was like an easy thing to kind of recreate and like just start from scratch. And I love the fact that they're just there for 15 days. It's like it's like a version of the COVID Summer House.
Oh yeah,
when they had and the Winter House as well. When they just kind of like locked them in our house for the summer, 6 weeks, I think, which was way too long. Luckily, this was only 15 days, and they still managed to get 8 episodes out of it. But
that's true. Well, the funny thing is, I actually don't like the premise of filming only for 2 weeks and them never being able to leave. I actually prefer the Summer House, like they're here for the weekends, they leave for the weekend, and they come back. I feel like when you get them all just like there for 2 weeks, like you do get a couple scenes where it's just like they're all just kind of sitting on the couch because they've been there for 2 weeks, and like also like it is a lot more explosive, and like you're gonna get annoyed of people to be in your space for like 2 weeks, which I guess is kind of the point. But like I still enjoyed it. Like I actually think it's a very fun show, and I understand why it can't be on the weekend, because you literally need to like fly to Martha's Vineyard. Except for Shanice, who like somehow is able to do that.
Able to do it, just has to do, apparently. Like having to go back and forth for a job just to be there. Like she's been there for like what, 4 days?
Yeah.
Out of like 15, like, and has to travel probably the equivalent, like.
But she
back and forth.
Caused quite the chaos in those 4 days that she was there.
Short period of time, but lasting impact, that's for sure. And I wonder if there's a way for both of these both of these sides of this franchise to kind of exist, where Summer House does the back and forth to the city, and maybe they get to bring in more of the city, because that is something that they were doing from the beginning, and I think that we're missing, especially with like Roni kind of like on pause at this point. Like old Roni is gone, new Roni is coming, but I think there's a bit of a gap in our like New York viewing, where we would love to see a little bit more New York. We'd love to kind of see that dynamic.
That's so true.
And like they could easily fill that in with the cast of Summer House, because they all live there, or for the most part they all live there. And then Martha's Vineyard kind of like being able to kind of like be the opposite of that, where it is really like a concentrated like short period of time, like an intense burst, and like we'll see what unfolds and kind of like see how that changes the dynamics of the two different shows.
Yeah, and honestly, like the fact that Martha's Vineyard is even like being talked about at all, and I think they're doing decently well, is pretty impressive when like they are coming up against such a seasoned show already. They weren't really publicized that much. Like they've been on they've been on Watch What Happens Live a little bit, but like the world has been so like consumed by like, you know, VPR and like all these other things that like they are not the main focus. But I think that they did have a pretty strong first season. The fact that we're like invested in them at all like is definitely saying something, right?
Oh no, 1,000,000%. I think they had an amazing like first season. Like this was probably one of the best first seasons I've seen since like Family Karma. Like I feel like that's another one that came out like pretty strong out of the gate. Like it's not going to be massive crazy explosions in the first season, and it really shouldn't be. Like I don't think we need that. You know, I can think of like maybe a handful of shows that were able to like really create a lot of drama from the get-go, and that was maybe like probably like Atlanta and New Jersey are like the two that come to mind of like ones that like really like they had confrontation from the beginning, they had intense like emotions and everything.
Vanderpump Rules.
Vanderpump. Oh my god, yeah. Jeez, what a blind spot. But yeah, no, that I think that they've done an incredible job. And you're as you say, like to their credit, they've been going up against Scandival, like to still be holding your own and having people talk about you, even though you know this massive other thing is happening. That's pretty impressive.
So, what are your overall thoughts on the cast?
I love them. I love all of them. I just love the like different dynamics that they're all bringing. I know that Silas and Jasmine are not fan favorites, but I think it's super interesting because I think they both came in thinking that they were gonna be like the solid couple. They were gonna be the newlyweds. Everybody, you know, they were like helping host this thing. They were organizing it. Like they kind of really came across as like what they thought they were going to be as a very like stable couple, and they have not been bad at all.
Oh yeah. So for those
yeah.
for those that don't watch, essentially there's like one married couple who just got married. And I think they only started dating in COVID and then they got married.
They're like a new relationship.
Yeah. And then the rest of them are like single or like, you know, have have partners who aren't in the house. It kind of like there was a little bit of a Lindsay and Carl similarity too to what you were just saying, that like they did kind of think that they were coming in and being like, we're going to portray the perfect couple and like that's going to be our thing. And that's kind of like what rubs the rest of the cast a little bit the wrong way. Yeah. But in this particular scenario, like their, you know, facade lasts like a day because you could really see like the cracks, and that like actually them trying to be the perfect couple is what is kind of tearing them apart. And like you see so many red flags in this relationship, especially just like how much they talk about just how different like marriage is. You could just really see here that they got married very quickly and like they didn't have enough time to kind of familiarize themselves with each other's like habits or like, you know, just like understand who they are as a unit.
Yeah, well, even the fact that they have like different vacation styles, like the fact that Silas didn't know coming into this like 2-week vacation that, you know, his wife wasn't gonna like get up and like make his toast and like get up early and like make his toast or whatever, make him breakfast every day. Like she wanted to be able to sleep in because she's on vacation. Like that, I am a chronic sleeper inner. Like I could never like wake up early to make sure that I'm making you breakfast on my vacation of all time.
I know. Oh my god. Yeah, he's like super controlling and like super into just like traditional like gender stereotypes of like, okay, well you're gonna iron my clothes and like you're gonna make me dinner and breakfast and like I'm gonna protect you because I'm a man. And, like,
there was one part in like I think it was the most recent episode where she made him like breakfast and he was like, this is toast, I can't eat bread. And she's like, oh, it's not bread, it's potatoes. And he's like, it's starch.
Yeah,
I can't eat starch. And he's just like, I would have like gone and like tipped it on him. I would just been like, here's all your breakfast, eat it. Like it's on you now. Because like just the way that he was talking to her, like I couldn't.
Clearly just like really doesn't, almost seemingly like who she kind of was single. Like he's very like he doesn't want to see her like that. Like
I did love the guys like egging on him when he like wanted to accept the shots from the girls at the bar, and they were like, oh, you can't have no shots for you.
I know.
Like, you can't accept drinks as a married man. Hey, where's your wedding ring?
And then he didn't even wear his wedding ring. Yeah, just like you can dish it up, but you can't take it.
Right? Yeah, I loved that.
And like also just like the need for them to control everything in the house, and like have all these like house meetings, and like just like if anyone like doesn't do things the way they like it. Like he wanted to like kick out Bria because her dog pooped on the floor and she picked it up. Like he wanted to have a house meeting to talk about the dog poop on the floor. When she
that dog poop was like, one straw too far.
He was literally like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you're gonna pick it up.
Let me go pick it up. I know.
And he's still like,
this happened. The fact that they've had so many like Survivor style like what is it when they do it on Survivor,
the
like
house
tribulations?
The
whatever, where they get like voted off the island.
And they did. They voted people off the island.
They voted at least 2 people off the island, and
one
I think
definitely deserved it. That guy Phil sucked.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, I don't think he understood what he was getting himself into here. But yeah, I think overall I really enjoyed the cast. I don't know, how are you feeling?
No, same. I do really like it. I think there's like a good mix of like drama and real life and like backstory and culture, and like it's just fun.
Yeah, it is. It's really good.
Yeah, Bria's getting a lot of hate, but like I think that she's like really good for reality television. I think that she comes in and she stirs the pot and then like just enough
and then walks away and goes hang out in her bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that like for me, Amir and Jordan are kind of like 2 standouts. They're super fun. Jordan obviously has had like a little bit of drama this season, which I think is always interesting. But I think Amir is just like super lovable and adorable, and like I can't wait for him to come back next season.
I know, Amir is so likable. I think he's definitely my favorite. I really like Summer. I think she's like a little like she came in later, but I feel like she has like really, she's very like level-headed and fun and just like chill.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like both of the replacements that they brought in because Jason's also like pretty cool. I'm definitely interested for him to come back next season so we get more of a storyline from him. And I think Preston's also like really cool. Actually, I don't know. I like all of them because there's there's Alex and Nick too. They're all so good.
Yeah, I like Preston.
Yeah, I love this group.
Yeah, I think he calls it what he calls it like it is. Alex definitely gives me pretentious vibes. Like he's
I
like,
could see that. I could see that. He's a little bit, yeah. I would be curious to know everybody's like star, sun, and moon signs so that we could like do like a real diagnosis of like who is this cast, what's going on here, why are the dynamics the way that they are.
Yeah. I do wonder which one of them though has like who is like the Lindsay and Kyle, like, you know, who are like these are like people who are born to be on reality television. Like what is their longevity in like as Bravo celebrities? I do wonder about. It would be like I think we just have to see them more.
So I wonder if honestly, if we have like a more balanced cast where there's no like one particular kind of like hothead in the group, and there's more of like a balanced group, like if they'll all be able to kind of coexist in a way that's like less toxic than what we see in Summer House with like Kyle, who, you know, as fun as he is, and Mr. Sendet, like
problematic.
Yeah, like right, like the years of him like yelling at Amanda and like just like being such like an overall like intense presence in the house. Like he really does, like he's fun now, but like last season he was not fun.
No, for sure.
Lindsay's another one who like takes up a lot of like air in the room, and maybe this cast is a little bit more balanced and they won't kind of have some of the same problems that the Summer House OG cast, I guess, has had.
No, it's very true.
So I don't know. I'm excited to see how it goes from here. Let us know what you guys think. Are you liking Martha's Vineyard? Are you watching Martha's Vineyard? If not, what else are you watching? Are we watching the OC? Are we watching Atlanta? Like, let us know. And yeah, have a nice day. What? No, weird. Bye.